Have you ever met someone and felt it instantly? Not attraction, not interest, but something deeper, something unsettling, as if your brain made a decision before you had time to think. You don't know their name, you don't know their story, you don't even know if you like them, and yet, your body reacts first. Your heart rate changes, your breathing shifts, your attention narrows. The room feels quieter. Time slows down, and for a brief moment, everything else disappears. This is not romance. This is not destiny. This is biology. And what happens in your brain during those first seconds is far more powerful and far more dangerous than most people realize. Because love at first sight doesn't begin in the heart. It begins in the brain's oldest survival systems. Before logic, before reason, before choice. Let me take you inside those first moments. Imagine this. You walk into a room. It could be a cafe, a subway station, a party, or a completely ordinary place. Your mind is elsewhere, thinking about work, stress, something unimportant. And then you see them. Nothing dramatic happens on the outside. No music, no slow motion. But inside your brain, a cascade begins. Your eyes capture thousands of details in milliseconds. Posture, facial symmetry, micro-expressions, movement, voice tone if they speak. You are not aware of this, but your brain is. The visual cortex sends this information instantly to the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system. The amygdala does not ask questions. It does not analyze personality or values. It asks one thing only. Is this important for survival? And for reasons shaped by evolution, past experiences, and subconscious memory, the answer sometimes comes back as yes. Not because the person is perfect, but because something about them matches a deep internal pattern. A pattern built from childhood attachment, early emotional experiences, and unmet needs you may not even remember. At this moment, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical, as many believe. It is the anticipation chemical. It tells your brain, pay attention. This matters. Your focus sharpens. Your curiosity spikes. You want more information. This is why people often describe love at first sight as magnetic. You are not drawn toward the person. Your brain is pulling you closer. At the same time, another chemical begins to rise. Norepinephrine. This increases alertness. It heightens memory formation. It makes the moment feel vivid and important. That's why years later, people can remember exactly where they were, what they were wearing, and what the other person looked like when they first met. The brain marks the moment as significant. But here's where it becomes dangerous. As dopamine rises, activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking, judgment, and skepticism, begins to decrease. You are literally less capable of critical thinking. Your brain doesn't want logic. It wants continuation. This is why red flags are invisible in the beginning, not ignored, invisible. Your brain filters reality to protect the emotional narrative it has already chosen. And then comes oxytocin. Often called the bonding hormone, oxytocin increases trust, emotional openness, and a sense of safety. But oxytocin doesn't care if the person is safe. It only creates the feeling of safety. This is why people sometimes trust someone they barely know, and later wonder how they could have been so blind. Because the blindness wasn't emotional, it was neurological. Now let's go deeper. Love at first sight is not actually about the person you see. It's about recognition. Your brain constantly searches for familiar emotional patterns. Not familiar faces, familiar feelings. If someone triggers a pattern that matches a deep emotional memory, especially from early attachment, the brain reacts as if something lost has been found, even if consciously you've never met them before. This is why love at first sight often feels nostalgic, as if you've known the person forever, as if they feel familiar. Your brain is not responding to who they are. It is responding to who they represent. This could be someone who feels emotionally unavailable in the same way a parent once was, or someone whose warmth mirrors a caretaker you felt safe with. The brain does not distinguish between past and present when emotional patterns align. It only knows this matters. And once this loop begins, the brain reinforces it. Every smile from the person becomes evidence. Every neutral interaction becomes interpreted as meaningful. Your brain releases dopamine again, not because of what happened, but because of what it hopes will happen. This is why love at first sight feels intense, but fragile. It is built on projection. Now here is something most people never hear. Love at first sight activates the same neural pathways as addiction: the anticipation, the craving, the emotional highs and lows. The brain doesn't want connection, it wants certainty. It wants to close the loop, and the uncertainty makes it stronger. This is why minimal interaction can intensify feelings, because the brain fills in the gaps. Silence becomes mystery, distance becomes desire, and absence becomes obsession. But there is another layer. Mirror neurons. These neurons fire when we observe others and simulate their internal state. If someone moves, speaks, or expresses emotion in a way that subconsciously matches us, our brain mirrors them. This creates a sense of being understood without words. You feel seen, even if nothing personal has been shared. This is incredibly powerful and incredibly misleading, because the feeling of being understood does not mean you're understood. It means your nervous systems resonate. Now let's pause. Why does this happen to some people and not others? Why can one person walk into a room and trigger nothing, while another changes everything? The answer lies in emotional readiness. When the brain is open to bonding, after loneliness, emotional deprivation, or personal transition, it is more sensitive to signals of connection. Your brain becomes a radar. This is why love at first sight often happens during periods of change: new cities, new jobs, emotional vulnerability, endings, beginnings. The brain is searching, and when it finds something that feels like a solution, it latches on. Not because it's right, because it's available. Now here's the truth most people don't want to accept. Love at first sight is not love. It is attachment forming faster than understanding. Real love requires time, because it requires integration of reality. Love at first sight skips reality. It replaces it with narrative. That doesn't make it fake. It makes it incomplete. Some love stories that begin this way grow into something real, but only if reality eventually replaces projection. Others collapse painfully because the brain resists letting go of the story it created. And letting go feels like loss, even if the person was never truly known. Your brain doesn't grieve the person, it grieves the future it imagined. This is why heartbreak can be so intense, even after short connections. Because the brain had already lived years ahead. Now here's the most important part. You cannot control whether love at first sight happens, but you can control what you do after. Awareness changes the process. When you understand that your brain is flooding you with chemicals designed for survival, bonding, and reproduction, not truth, you gain power. You can slow down, you can observe, you can let reality catch up. And something fascinating happens when you do. If the connection is real, it deepens. If it was illusion, it fades. But the intensity always reduces, because intensity was never meant to last. Intensity gets attention. Depth builds connection. And your brain, once out of survival mode, begins to see clearly again. The mystery softens. The person becomes human. And only then can love, real love, begin. So the next time you feel it, that instant pull, that magnetic certainty, that feeling that something important has just happened, don't ask yourself, is this love? Ask yourself, what part of me is waking up right now? Because your brain is not lying, but it is speaking a language older than words. And understanding that language might be the difference between losing yourself and finding something real.